Harley-Davidson made a decision that could haunt them for decades. Prices soared, factories went quiet, and loyal riders, they're walking away. Stick around to the end because this story isn't just about Harley. It's about how fast an empire can crumble when it forgets who it's built for. This price hike was a declaration of war. The announcement came without warning, and it hit like a punch to the gut. Harley-Davidson, the brand that once stood for freedom, rebellion, and working-class pride, jacked up prices on some of its most beloved models. Not by a few $100s, but by thousands. For longtime riders, many of whom have ridden Harleys for decades and poured tens of thousands into maintenance, gear, and loyalty, the message was clear. Loyalty doesn't matter anymore. The 2025 Road Glide, once accessible to a wide swath of enthusiasts, now starts at over $27,000. The Street Glide pushed even higher. And with no meaningful performance upgrades to justify the markup, fans weren't just confused, they were furious. This wasn't inflation. This wasn't a supply chain issue. Harley gave no clear explanation. Instead, it felt like a calculated squeeze on the very people who built the company into a cultural icon. Riders who had survived Harley's worst years, through the AMF era, through the rough 90s, saw this move not as a business strategy, but as betrayal. The price hike didn't just affect customers, it cut into the soul of the Harley experience. Suddenly, owning a Harley felt less like joining a tribe and more like buying into a luxury club that no longer wanted you as a member. That's why the reaction wasn't just loud, it was personal. Riders who had Harley logos inked into their skin began speaking out. Veterans of biker clubs, first responders, small-town mechanics, these weren't casual fans. These were people who had sacrificed to stay loyal, and now they were asking the one question Harley never expected to hear. Why should I stay? The old promise that if you bought into Harley, Harley would ride with you for life was broken in a single press release. But pricing alone wasn't the only reason the community snapped. It was when this decision landed and what else was happening in the background that truly lit the fire. Whether you ride or not, this is about loyalty, jobs, and what's happening to America's identity. If you've ever felt like Harley turned its back on real riders, hit like and drop a comment. Your story might be the wake-up call this industry needs. The industry was already fragile. Harley just lit the fuse. The motorcycle industry wasn't thriving. Demand had been slipping for years. Dealerships were already fighting to keep doors open. Financing had tightened. And younger buyers? Nowhere in sight. Into that pressure cooker, Harley dropped a match. Instead of reading the room, the company acted like it didn't need one. The price surge came as small shops were already downsizing, and independent sellers were running fire sales just to survive. Harley didn't lift them. It left them behind. For small-town dealers, this wasn't a business move, it was a kill shot. One owner described it as suicide pricing, high enough to scare buyers away, low enough margin to strangle the seller. And that sense of recklessness spread fast. In group chats, forums, and trade networks, one word kept surfacing: abandonment. Harley wasn't just misjudging the market, it was detonating it. And that chaos created an opening, one that everyday riders rushed to fill with something louder than engines. The gear we ride with, the tools we trust, it's all in the description, from patches to posts. Riders fight back online. Almost overnight, social media turned into a digital battlefield. Riders who once rallied behind Harley began tearing into it. The hashtags #boycott Harley and #Harley sold out started trending. Facebook groups with thousands of members became rally points for dissent. Popular motorcycle YouTubers posted video after video dissecting the price hike, corporate decisions, and perceived abandonment of the brand's roots. And it wasn't just casual noise, it was focused, passionate, and coordinated. One of the most prominent voices in this rebellion was Robbie Starbuck, a political influencer who took the outrage viral. He pointed not only to the price increase, but to Harley's broader ideological shifts, warning that the company had gone the way of Bud Light, pandering to an audience that didn't ride and alienating the one that did. His posts gained traction, but more importantly, they gave riders a clear narrative. This isn't a random mistake. It's the beginning of Harley losing its soul. The momentum grew. Riders shared screenshots of their canceled dealership appointments. Some posted pictures of their Harley tattoos with captions like, "Never again." Dealers reported customers coming in just to say they wouldn't be back. It was organized, but it wasn't corporate. It was raw, grassroots backlash, and unlike previous outrage cycles that fizzled out in days, this one showed staying power. Because this wasn't about a political point or a single ad, it was about identity. For decades, Harley-Davidson didn't just sell bikes, it sold rebellion. It sold working-class pride. It sold an American story. And now the very people who believed that story were writing a new one, without Harley in it. But as the online fire raged, a more concrete reality started to set in. On the ground, in real places, where money changes hands and the bottom line lives or dies. Empty tents, quiet lots, the dealer meltdown begins. Sturgis was supposed to be Harley's victory lap. Instead, it was a ghost town. Tents meant to showcase new models stood deserted. Sales teams whispered about no-shows and quiet leads. The lot where people once fought for test rides, empty. Dealers were the first to feel it in real time. Appointments vanished, down payments were canceled, and for the first time in years, even returning customers came in angry. "I've bought 4 bikes from you," one rider told a Milwaukee salesman, "but I won't buy betrayal." Financing partners began pulling back too. Why invest in inventory no one trusts? Harley's brand strength had always been its safety net, but now that net was on fire. Some dealers whispered that they'd be forced to start stocking competitors. Others admitted they'd already done it, because when your best customers become your loudest critics, you're not in a slump, you're in free fall. And what came next would shake not just Harley, but the very soul of the riding community itself. This isn't my Harley anymore. When a brand becomes unrecognizable, it doesn't just lose customers, it loses believers. They didn't just ride these bikes, they wore them, inked them, lived them. Harley wasn't a company, it was a creed. And now, for thousands of riders, that identity feels broken. For decades, Harley-Davidson stood for rebellion wrapped in steel. It was the thrum of American grit, a two-wheeled declaration of independence. But when the price hike hit and the silence followed, something deeper cracked. Not just wallets, not just trust, identity. Clubs that once defended the brand like a brotherhood now speak of it in the past tense. Lifelong owners are peeling Harley stickers off their garages, removing patches from their vests. This isn't anger, it's mourning. They're not switching brands. They're grieving a version of themselves that no longer exists. The bond between Harley and its riders was personal, but now that connection has gone cold. Not from competition, from betrayal. And just as this fracture deepened, the reason behind it all became painfully clear. When Harley went woke, the riders went home. It wasn't just a price hike, it was a shift in values. When CEO Jochen Zeitz called himself the Taliban of climate change, when Harley began pushing DEI initiatives and sponsoring drag story events, something fundamental snapped in the rider base. These weren't minor decisions, they were statements, loud ones. To Harley's traditional audience, it felt like a rejection. A company once built on grit and gear oil now seemed more invested in boardroom virtue signals than biker bloodlines. The backlash wasn't subtle. Riders canceled pre-orders. Influencers like Robbie Starbuck amplified the outrage. Club forums lit up with disbelief. And at Sturgis, Harley's tent sat nearly empty, a vacuum where pride used to be. No one's saying you can't evolve. But Harley didn't evolve. They were replaced. What once stood for individualism now echoed corporate conformity. And that's not just a strategic error, it's cultural sabotage. As riders turned their backs, Harley turned inward, hoping the storm would pass. It didn't. It got worse. Because while the world outside erupted, the inside was falling apart too. Corporate panic behind the curtain. At headquarters, the silence said it all. No press statements, no leadership videos, just locked comment sections and paused social feeds. But behind that blackout, panic. Internal memos leaked. Brand managers clashed. Crisis teams scrambled to rewrite talking points while executives argued over whether to lean in or shut down. One source called it a confidence collapse. No one knew who was leading or where they were headed. Even longtime dealers were left guessing. Orders stalled. Customer inquiries surged, but Harley offered no plan. Only confusion. The brand that once roared with swagger was now whispering contradictions. The result? A PR void filled by everyone else. Critics shaped the narrative. Competitors ran with it. And loyalists realized something they hadn't wanted to admit. The people running Harley didn't sound like Harley anymore. They sounded like a company scared of its own shadow, unsure whether to apologize or double down. And in that vacuum, something irreversible took hold. The trust is gone. And it's not coming back. Harley's leadership hoped this would blow over, that the backlash was noise. That time would heal what outrage had opened. It didn't, because this wasn't about headlines, it was about history. Riders remember. They remember sticking with Harley through the AMF years when the bikes rattled and leaked. They remember defending it in tattoo shops, garages, and bars when critics called it outdated. They were never in it for perfection. They were in it for identity. But loyalty is a two-way road, and when Harley offshored jobs, raised prices, and rewrote its values, that road hit a wall. Now clubs are cutting ties permanently. Communities that once rode together in chrome solidarity are fragmenting. And younger buyers, those Harley desperately needed, are watching all of this and choosing silence over allegiance. Because this isn't just a product problem, it's a trust collapse. And trust, once broken, doesn't come back with a new ad campaign. It comes back, if ever, one rider at a time. And right now, Harley is running out of those too. The books don't lie. Harley's bleeding out. It wasn't just bad PR, it was a balance sheet screaming in pain. When Harley's latest financials dropped, they confirmed what riders had been saying for months. Something is broken. Quarterly shipments had plunged. Revenues were down, and profit slashed deep, with forecasts pulled entirely off the table. Wall Street reacted instantly. Harley stock slipped fast, then flatlined. Confidence drained from the investor calls. Executives dodged hard questions with vague promises of long-term pivots and global efficiencies, a coded phrase that no one believes anymore. Behind the numbers was a deeper truth. Harley's entire sales strategy had cracked. New riders weren't arriving. Loyalists were walking away. And dealers? They were left sitting on inventory no one wanted and financing no one could stomach. The numbers weren't just a red flag, they were the sound of a brand bleeding from the inside, faster than anyone at the top was willing to admit. And while the profits dried up, another rupture was forming, one that cut straight through Harley's patriotic image. Built in Thailand, sold to Americans. The Patriotism Reversal. It wasn't whispered, it wasn't leaked. Harley said it out loud. Production of core U.S. models was moving overseas. For decades, they leaned on their American-made image like it was a sacred badge. Now they were sending it across the Pacific, straight into a factory in Thailand. The reaction was instant and ugly. Union leaders condemned the move as a betrayal. Workers at the Menominee Falls plant described the announcement as a gut punch. For some, it meant layoffs. For others, it meant the death of something they'd spent their whole lives building. Even casual fans felt the sting. A Harley with "Made in Thailand" stamped inside the frame? That wasn't a symbol of freedom. It was a brand erasing its birthplace, chasing cheaper labor while still charging premium prices. This wasn't about margins. It was about meaning. Because when a company sells its soul for cost savings, the price isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in trust, and Harley just spent the last of it. But while riders looked outward in disbelief, the company was facing something just as destabilizing from within. The CEO exit nobody believed. When the man who called himself the Taliban of climate suddenly steps down, you know there's fire behind the smoke. Jochen Seitz was supposed to be Harley's savior, a visionary leader, a climate evangelist, a bold reformer. Instead, he became the lightning rod for the company's worst crisis in decades. And when news broke of his exit, it wasn't seen as a transition. It was seen as a retreat. The timing wasn't subtle. It followed a wave of viral backlash, financial collapse, and silence from Harley's official channels. Internally, employees described a leadership team in total paralysis, flip-flopping between damage control and full-scale retreat. Externally, nothing made sense. The man who had tethered Harley to ESG narratives and global production strategies was gone, with no clear successor in place. Was he forced out? Was this strategic repositioning? Or was the board scrambling behind closed doors to stop the bleeding before the next shareholder revolt? Whatever the truth, the impact was immediate. Investors lost faith, partners pulled back, and inside dealerships across the country, employees whispered one word over and over again: chaos. And while Harley scrambled to fill its power vacuum, its rivals wasted no time making their move. Rivals smell blood, and they're already gaining ground. While Harley argued with itself, Indian rolled off the lot with their customers. In any industry, a collapse at the top creates a vacuum, and Harley-Davidson's implosion has opened the floodgates for rivals. Leading the charge is Indian Motorcycle, the brand that once battled Harley in the early 20th century and is now positioning itself as the new leader of American muscle on two wheels. Indian has moved aggressively in recent months, offering more modern features, competitive pricing, and a marketing message that leans into heritage without alienating tradition. Indian's latest touring models are winning over former Harley loyalists, not just with tech and price, but with attitude. They're capturing that rough-around-the-edges pride that Harley used to own. Riders who felt disrespected or priced out are walking into Indian dealerships and riding away with bikes they say feel more like the real thing than anything Harley currently sells. And it's not just Indian. BMW and Honda are expanding their cruiser offerings. They're investing in electric models, comfort packages, and long-distance durability, areas where Harley has struggled to innovate. The playing field is shifting fast, and Harley is standing still, wrapped in its own confusion. For the first time in decades, the competition doesn't just look competent, it looks cool, and it looks clear on who it wants to serve. Harley, meanwhile, is still rewriting its mission statement. Every customer lost to Indian, BMW, or Honda is more than a missed sale. It's a blow to Harley's brand mythology, because once riders start telling their friends that Indian gets it, that BMW is more refined, that Honda gives you more for less, the perception shifts. And in an industry where perception is product, Harley is losing the most valuable commodity it ever had: belief. As the competitors gain speed and Harley continues to stumble, one thing becomes undeniable. The spiral is accelerating, and the fallout is no longer confined to bikes, rallies, or balance sheets. It's starting to shape labor markets, political debates, and economic narratives on a national scale. Tariffs, trade wars, and a nation watching closely. It started with a price hike. It spiraled into a backlash. Now it's igniting a policy war that reaches far beyond motorcycles. When Harley-Davidson confirmed that American-bound bikes would now be built in Thailand, Washington took notice, and it didn't take long for lawmakers to load the chamber. Across both parties, voices rose demanding consequences. Some called for tariffs on imported motorcycles. Others proposed new laws redefining what qualifies as American-made. Suddenly, Harley wasn't just a company in crisis. It was a case study in broken promises. This moment was tailor-made for populist politics. Politicians rushed to denounce Harley as another symbol of corporate betrayal. Press conferences were held. Legislation was drafted, all of it designed to show voters that loyalty still matters, at least on the campaign trail. But it wasn't just rhetoric. The economic pressure was real. Harley's move opened the door to sweeping trade reviews, reshoring incentives, and renewed scrutiny of companies exploiting patriotic branding while outsourcing American jobs. And while the political heat kept rising, something quieter was happening out in the real world. The people who once bought these bikes, they were walking away. The American rider is looking elsewhere. Harley riders aren't just mad, they're moving on. After decades of loyalty, the emotional break is happening fast and without ceremony. The open roads that once echoed with the rumble of V-twins are quieter now, or filled with new sounds: foreign bikes, electric bikes, and in some cases, no bikes at all. Many are turning to the used market, refusing to buy new Harley models at inflated prices. Others are buying Indian or BMW, brands once unthinkable to touch. The next generation, they're not entering the scene at all. Some cite price, others cite politics. Most just say Harley doesn't speak to them anymore. It's more than a sales drop, it's a cultural handoff. Motorcycling itself isn't dying, but the identity that Harley wrapped itself in is. The jacket and patch lifestyle no longer holds the same weight when the brand behind it feels hollow. The worst part? Harley doesn't seem to have a plan for these defectors. No apology, no clarity, just silence. And that vacuum is getting filled by competitors, by critics, and now by investors losing faith in the entire story. Wall Street wakes up to the Harley illusion. The myth was worth billions until the myth died. For years, Harley-Davidson's market value was anchored in more than just sales. It was anchored in myth. Investors paid a premium not just for quarterly profits, but for the strength of the brand. That chrome and leather image of the all-American rebel created immense goodwill. Even when earnings sagged, the brand's cultural gravity kept its stock price afloat. Not anymore. As the backlash grew, the illusion began to crack. Analysts revised their forecasts. hedge funds started trimming their holdings. By mid-2025, Harley's stock had lost nearly 28% of its value from its peak the previous year. Investor calls turned hostile. Shareholders demanded clarity, but clarity never came. Instead, they got silence, contradictions, and vague promises about electrification and global markets. The underlying message was impossible to ignore. Harley was no longer a cultural asset. It was a liability. The image that once sold bikes and boosted share prices had become radioactive. Being America's motorcycle was now a double-edged sword, and Wall Street didn't want to be caught on the wrong side of it. One financial advisor put it bluntly in a recent interview. Brand equity used to be their biggest moat. Now it's dragging them underwater. Harley's own pivot toward lifestyle branding and overseas markets had backfired. Investors who once believed in Harley's transformation story were now fleeing from it. This wasn't just a brand in trouble, it was a cautionary tale, and what it says to the market is chilling. No amount of heritage can save a company that loses its tribe. And now, as Harley looks to whatever future it can still salvage, one haunting truth remains. If survival is possible, it will come at the cost of everything the brand used to be. Still watching? That means you care about more than just chrome. Subscribe now and stay ahead of every breakdown, betrayal, and bold new alternative coming next. If Harley survives, it won't be Harley anymore. Harley will keep selling motorcycles, but the soul of the brand, that's gone. It's not about whether the name survives, it's what it represents now that matters. And for many, the answer is clear: not much. The rebellion it once stood for has been replaced by PR silence. The American steel and sweat it once symbolized is now parts lists from overseas. Even the riding culture it championed has fractured into niche segments, each chasing their own meaning while Harley tries to please everyone and no one. Some speculate the brand will go boutique, catering to wealthy collectors and overseas buyers. Others believe it'll pivot fully to EVs and tech-driven design, chasing relevance in Silicon Valley instead of Sturgis. A few even suggest it will become a nostalgia relic, alive but without purpose, a museum piece with a marketing budget. But ask anyone who spent their life defending the brand, who inked it into their skin, who stuck by it through bad years, and they'll tell you the real Harley is already gone. Because in the end, identity isn't built in factories, it's built in people. And when the people walk away, so does the meaning. This didn't end with a press release, it didn't stop at Sturgis. And it's not just Harley. What we're watching is the unraveling of something bigger, the myth that iconic brands will always stand by the people who built them. Because when loyalty is one-sided, it's not loyalty, it's leverage. Harley-Davidson may survive this. They may pivot, rebrand, or disappear into a world of boardrooms and foreign assembly lines. But the trust, the tribe, that's gone. And when that goes, no marketing budget in the world can bring it back. So, the next time a company tells you it's American-made, built on tradition, loyal to its roots, remember what happened here. Look past the logo, follow the money, and ask yourself, who are they really building for now? Harley forgot who it was built for. But while they chase luxury and abandon loyalty, some bikes still put riders first, without the markup. Tap here to discover the Japanese motorcycles that deliver unbeatable value and old-school soul. Like, comment, and subscribe, because smart riders don't wait to get priced out.